You might be sabotaging your own growth and not even realize it, just by doing something that feels harmless, telling everyone what's happening in your personal life. Every time you share that you're struggling, that you're trying to change, that someone hurt you, you think you're releasing the weight. But in reality, you're reinforcing an identity. You're retelling an old story with the same ending, and then you live like you are that story. Not everyone needs to know what you're going through. Not everyone has the depth to understand it. And more importantly, not everyone deserves access to the most private parts of your life that you so easily hand over in conversation. If you truly want to evolve, start with silence. Stop announcing your every move. Don't confuse talking about change with actually changing. Because the one who speaks less and does more will always earn more respect than the one who talks loudly and never follows through. In this video, you're going to learn how to use silence as a weapon of strength, not as a sign of fear. And if this message already stirs something inside you, drop a comment below saying, "I am a Stoic." Share a moment where silence helped you grow. And most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you never miss the lessons that help you live with more power, more clarity, and more peace. Quietly, but with undeniable presence. 1. The more you talk about pain, the more you reinforce it. Have you ever seen someone scratching a wound that hasn't healed yet? At first, it's a reaction to discomfort, but over time it becomes a habit. And if they keep going, the skin scars in a way that never truly fades. We do the same thing with our emotional pain, except we don't scratch it, we speak it. Over and over again. We narrate our hurt, repeat our disappointments, rehearse the same betrayal, the same failure, the same shame, until it becomes not just a story we tell, but a role we start to live in. The mind doesn't treat repetition lightly. It's a pattern-seeking machine. The more often you say something, especially when it's about your own suffering, the more your brain encodes it as part of your identity. Not just something that happened to you, but who you are. And from there, you begin to build your thoughts, your behaviors, even your relationships around that narrative. You begin to look for confirmation of your hurt, and guess what, you find it, because once pain becomes your script, the world starts to play along. This is the hidden danger of oversharing, especially about the things that wounded you most. Every conversation becomes a stage. Every friend becomes an audience. And each retelling digs the story deeper into your nervous system. You believe you're processing, when in truth, you're practicing the posture of powerlessness. You become fluent in victimhood, not because you want to suffer, but because the act of expressing it gives temporary relief. But relief is not healing. Relief is escape. Healing is silence, reflection, and slow internal restructuring. Healing begins when you stop feeding the pain with words, because the more you talk about it, the more you attach yourself to it. And the more you attach, the harder it is to let go. The Stoics understood this far before modern psychology ever gave it a name. They weren't cold, and they weren't numb. They just refused to give their energy to what they couldn't control, especially when it came to repeating their wounds. To them, speaking was an act of precision. You used it to clarify, not to indulge. You used it to build, not to bleed. And when it came to pain, they taught a powerful form of restraint, not suppression, but redirection. Because silence is not weakness, it's strategy. It's how you stop the cycle of mental chaos and reclaim inner peace. Today, people confuse openness with strength. They believe that telling everyone what hurts is a form of courage. But courage, in its truest form, is choosing to sit with the discomfort quietly without making it your personality. It's allowing pain to exist without turning it into a performance. This doesn't mean you should bottle up everything, but it means you must choose carefully who, when, and why you speak. Ask yourself, do I need help or do I just need validation? Do I want to heal or do I just want to be heard? Because those are not the same thing. One moves you forward. The other keeps you stuck going in circles, wearing your scars like a badge you never asked for, but now feel unable to remove. There's a kind of inner strength that can only be built in silence, and those who practice it begin to change. They no longer feel the need to repeat their pain because they no longer see themselves through the lens of suffering. They speak less, but when they do, their words carry weight. Their energy no longer leaks through complaint or narration. It gathers, it becomes a quiet force, and eventually the world feels it without them needing to say a word. That is the power of not oversharing. That is the discipline of silence. And that, whether you call it stoicism or simply maturity, is what separates those who replay the same story from those who finally outgrow it. 2. Change without an audience is stronger. Have you ever whispered to yourself, if no one knows I'm changing, Am I really changing at all? That quiet question reveals something deeper than it seems. We've been conditioned to believe that growth must be witnessed to be real, that unless someone sees your evolution, it doesn't count. But here's the truth that most people avoid. The strongest, most lasting changes happen away from spotlight. You don't need an audience to become who you were meant to be. You just need consistency, direction, and the discipline to protect your progress from unnecessary attention. In today's world, almost everything is broadcast. People post their first workout, their new meditation habit, and their updated morning routine. Day one turns into content. But what if you chose silence instead? What if you made a shift without documenting it? Without explaining it? Without asking for support or applause? At first, it may feel strange. It might even feel empty. Because we've grown used to seeking emotional energy from others, the hearts, the claps, the comments. Yet when no one knows, when it's just you and the work, you begin to see what's real. You start to feel the difference between performance and practice. True change, deep, unshakable change, doesn't need validation to exist. It needs space. It needs to breathe without judgment. It needs quiet to take root. And once it does, it becomes a silent power that radiates from you in ways no words ever could. You don't have to announce your transformation for it to be noticed. One day, people will feel it in the way you walk into a room, in the way you speak with calm, in the way your presence no longer carries the old storm. That's what happens when you evolve for yourself, not for a reaction. I remember someone I knew. He never said a word about what he was working on.
No dramatic declarations.
No new year, new me. But after a few months I noticed something. He paused before responding. He listened more than he spoke. His words had precision, his eyes had steadiness. I later found out he'd been meditating, daily journaling, cutting out digital noise, and rebuilding himself quietly. That transformation didn't need a stage. It simply needed commitment. And now, he moves through life with a grounded energy that can't be faked or fast-tracked. The Stoics would call this self-sufficiency. They believed in the strength of internal transformation, the kind that doesn't ask for permission or praise. Marcus Aurelius didn't write to impress anyone. He wrote to sharpen his mind and soul. Epictetus didn't share his insights to gain followers. He shared because truth, once lived, must be integrated, not performed. This is what separates emotional independence from emotional dependence. When your evolution is quiet, it's yours. When it needs attention, it's fragile. So here's the test. Ask yourself this. If you couldn't tell anyone about what you're working on right now, would you still do it? Would you still get up early, still read that book, still train your mind, still protect your peace stoically, even if no one noticed? If the answer is yes, then you've already won. Because the most powerful transformations don't shout. They don't seek applause. They grow quietly, day by day, becoming part of who you are. Not something you display, but something you embody. Let others post their updates. Let them narrate every little step. You don't have to join. You're not falling behind. You're simply building strength in silence, where it's hardest to fake and most real to feel. When change no longer needs to be seen to matter, that's when it becomes permanent. And when your energy isn't spent explaining yourself but poured fully into becoming someone new, that's when transformation turns into identity. That's when no one needs to ask if you've changed, because they'll know, even if you never say a word. 3. You don't need to narrate your evolution. Your brain is smarter than you think, but also easier to fool than you'd expect. Studies have shown that when you talk about something you're planning to do, your brain often releases the same chemical reward, dopamine, as if you had already done it. You get the satisfaction, the feeling of progress, without any actual movement. That's why talking too soon about your goals feels good. But it's also why that talk becomes a trap. Every time you say, "I'm going to finally get serious," you steal a bit of your own momentum. You trick your system into thinking the work has started when nothing has changed. Instead of letting the results speak for themselves, you let the words go first, and too often, they never catch up. This is the hidden danger of narrating your evolution before it takes root. It's like popping champagne at the base of the mountain just because you decided to climb. You celebrate the decision, not the effort, not the grit, not the slow, steady movement that comes after the decision. And as the excitement wears off, you're left standing in the same place, wondering why the summit still feels far away. The truth is, when your transformation becomes something you talk about more than something you build, You're not evolving, you're performing, and a performance rarely leads to lasting change. In the age of social validation, we are trained to share our every move. But growth doesn't need a microphone. It needs discipline. It needs quiet repetition. It needs the kind of inner strength that doesn't ask for recognition. If you're serious about becoming someone stronger, someone calmer, someone more in control of their thoughts and reactions, then you must learn the art of moving in silence. That silence protects your energy. It allows you to focus not on being seen, but on being transformed. Marcus Aurelius didn't write his meditations to impress others. He wrote them to keep himself anchored. He understood that the act of evolving isn't something you announce. It's something you live. The Stoics knew that progress that is narrated too early becomes diluted. It turns into noise. And noise doesn't build clarity. It clouds it. They believed in private discipline over public display. Because when change is real, you don't need to tell everyone. It will show. People will notice. But more importantly, you will notice. You'll feel it in the way you respond instead of react. The way you detach from outcomes. The way you protect your peace with emotional discipline. That is not something you explain. That is something you embody. So the next time you feel the urge to post about your new mindset, to announce your goals, to tell a friend how you're finally going to take control, pause, ask yourself, do I need to say this or do I need to do it? Am I seeking commitment or applause because they are not the same? One is built on internal discipline, the other feeds on attention. If it real, it can wait. If it true, it doesn't need to be declared. There is certain dignity in quiet transformation, a strength in being unbothered by the need to explain. When you hold your process close and work on it quietly, it grows deep roots, it becomes stable, it no longer needs praise to stand. The Stoic mindset is not about hiding, it's about honoring. Honoring your direction without distraction. Choosing the path of invisible strength. The more you narrate your evolution, the more fragile it becomes. But when you stop speaking about what you're building and just build, you create something solid, something unshakable. Not everyone needs to know what's changing in you. But if the change is real, eventually, they won't need to be told. They'll feel it. And so will you. 4. Repeating the old story keeps you stuck in it. You've probably met someone like this. The guy who shows up to a gathering and without fail slips into the same story. The old job that never recognized his worth. The relationship that ended unfairly. The time he was misunderstood, overlooked, or betrayed. You've heard it before, so has everyone else. But he keeps telling it, as if repeating it enough times might finally change how it feels. But the problem isn't that the story is painful. The problem is that he doesn't realize he's living in it, long after it ended. He's not just recounting the past, he's building his identity around it. And whether he knows it or not, every time he tells that story, he reinforces it. It becomes less of a memory and more of a reality he still wears. The truth is, all of us carry an inner script. Sometimes it's quiet, sometimes loud, but it's there. Whispering lines like, I always mess things up. People like me don't get ahead, or I'm not the kind of person who leads. We don't just say these things to others, we rehearse them in our own heads. And each time we do, we tighten the chain that binds us to an outdated version of ourselves. It's like acting in a play where the stage has changed, the audience has changed, but we refuse to update the role. We keep playing the defeated character, even when life has already moved on. What we repeat becomes what we believe, and what we believe shapes what we allow ourselves to become. That's why the stories you tell about yourself matter more than you think. They're not harmless. They're not casual, they're blueprints. They dictate how you react, what you expect, and whether you even try. If you keep telling the story of your past failures, you will keep living like someone who always fails. Not because you are that person, but because your mind believes the script and your actions follow suit. The Stoics understood the power of this inner dialogue. They didn't obsess over the past because they knew it couldn't be changed. What mattered was the present judgment, the thought you chose in this moment. Epictetus said, it's not things that disturb us, but our judgments about them. If you keep judging yourself based on old chapters, you never get to write the next one. And sometimes, all it takes to begin again is this. Stop saying it. Stop saying you're unlucky. Stop saying you're always the one who gets overlooked. Stop telling people you're not good at relationships or money or leadership. These aren't facts. They're loops. And every time you say them, you press play again. Imagine you're holding a pen and instead of writing the next page, you keep rereading the first. The Stoic mindset teaches you to pick up the pen and start fresh. Not with grand declarations, not with fake positivity, but with a small, firm decision to stop giving voice to the story you no longer want to live. Because the moment you stop telling it, you begin creating something new. Not overnight. Not dramatically, but quietly and intentionally. Word by word. Choice by choice. So the next time you're tempted to explain yourself through the lens of the past, pause, ask yourself, is this who I am now? Or just who I used to be? And if it's the latter, let it go. You don't owe anyone a repeat of the old story. You owe yourself a chance to become the version of you that doesn't need it anymore. The power of silence here is not in hiding, but in choosing not to repeat what no longer serves. And that, at its core, is emotional clarity. That is how inner transformation begins, not with more words, but with fewer. Not by defending the past, but by refusing to relive it. One quiet decision at a time. 5. If you do it for you, you don't need to say it. Ask yourself this quietly: if no one ever praised you for changing, would you still do it? That one question cuts deeper than most people are ready for, because it reveals whether your growth is internal or just a performance for approval. In a world obsessed with being seen, the idea of silent self feels foreign, but it is in that silence, in that unseen progress, that your most powerful transformation begins. Real change doesn't need a stage, it doesn't crave validation, it doesn't need to be broadcast or liked or commented on. It just needs to be true. When you start letting go of what no longer serves you, be it toxic habits, emotional dependencies, or a self-image shaped by past pain, and you do it not to impress anyone, but because you want peace, that is the kind of change that lasts. You're not trying to prove anything. You're just realigning with yourself. You don't need a post about your healing. You don't need people to know you've started reading philosophy or working out at 6 a.m. or journaling at night. What matters is that you're doing it quietly, consistently, without the need for a spotlight. I once knew someone who had completely lost his sense of direction after a messy divorce. He didn't talk about it, he didn't announce his recovery plan, but slowly and privately he started rebuilding. He took up boxing, not to show off but to feel strength again. He started cooking, not to post pictures but to reclaim presence in his life. He read philosophy, not to quote it, but to understand how to think for himself again. 6 months later people noticed, not because he told them, but because his energy had shifted. His posture changed. His presence felt grounded. It wasn't the muscles or the recipes or the Stoic quotes. It was the unspoken calm that comes from rebuilding for no one but yourself. That is the power of self-directed change. It carries a different weight. It holds stillness. And when you stop needing applause for what you're doing, your actions stop being hollow gestures and start becoming real habits. There's something sacred about doing the right thing when no one is watching. It means you're operating from integrity, not ego. You're not chasing significance. You're choosing substance. That's what Stoic philosophy leads you to. Not louder declarations, but quieter convictions. Marcus Aurelius lived that way. His journals were not meant to be read. He wrote them to remind himself, not to impress others. He didn't need to convince anyone of his discipline. His life reflected it. That's the deeper lesson. When you do it for yourself, you don't have to say it. It will show. And not in the way social media teaches us, through pictures or captions or milestones, but in the way you carry yourself, the way you handle chaos, the way you're calm. OM disrupts the noise of others. Let go of the urge to narrate everything. When you change, let the transformation stay private until it's so strong that people feel it without you speaking a word. That's how you protect your peace. That's how you build inner growth in silence. If someone notices, fine. If no one does, even better. Because you didn't do it for them. You did it because something inside of you refused to stay the same. That's the kind of self-discipline that creates a real identity. That's the kind of power no one can give you and no one can take away. So the next time you feel the urge to explain, to prove, to announce, pause, ask yourself, am I doing this for me? Or am I doing this to be seen? If it's truly for you, then let it stay sacred, let it grow in silence, and trust that real change, the kind that lasts, never needs to shout, it just needs to be lived. 6. Not everyone deserves to know what's inside you. You've likely felt it before. That subtle sting of disappointment when you open up to someone, share something deeply personal, and their response flattens the moment. Maybe it's a shrug, a dismissive, You think that's bad, I've been through worse, or a blank stare that makes your vulnerability feel like an overreaction. It's the kind of moment that teaches you something hard but essential. Not everyone deserves access to your inner world. When you hand someone the map to your soul and they glance at it like it's a crumpled receipt, you begin to understand why silence sometimes is sacred. We live in a culture that rewards openness, where sharing is healing, is repeated like gospel. But there's a difference between sharing with someone who can hold your truth and pouring yourself out to those who lack the capacity or willingness to receive it without judgment. Some people, even those close to you, haven't done the work to listen deeply. Their own internal noise is so loud, they can't hear what you're really saying. And when you try harder to make them understand, when you push, explain, or repeat yourself, hoping they'll finally get it, you don't feel closer. You feel more alone. There's a young man I knew who had recently come out of therapy and was finally beginning to feel clear again after years of inner chaos. One afternoon, he tried to share part of that healing journey with a few just a small insight, a subtle shift he was proud of, but their reactions didn't land right. One made a joke, another smiled, half someone nodded politely and changed the subject. None of them meant harm, but the message was clear. This wasn't the place. That moment didn't just silence him. It reminded him that emotional depth requires the right container. And if you're pouring into the wrong one, the substance gets lost, or worse, dismissed. The Stoics never said, "Stay silent forever," but they urged discretion. Epictetus taught that if you want to grow, be prepared to be misunderstood, and protect your peace from those who cannot comprehend your path. Not because they are bad people, but because they may not be ready, or willing, or aware. Some truths, like seeds, need time and careful planting. If you throw them on dry ground, they will not sprout. And if you force them into conversation, they may be stepped on before they ever take root. Your inner life is not public property. It's not a marketplace, and you are not obligated to explain your healing, your decisions, or your emotional growth to anyone who hasn't earned your trust. Sharing is not always a strength. Sometimes sharing too freely is self-sabotage. You end up feeling exposed, not understood, exhausted, and not seen. That's why emotional boundaries aren't walls, they're filters. You don't build them to push people away. You build them to protect what's still growing. So ask yourself, the next time you feel the urge to open up, why am I sharing this? Is it because I trust this person, or because I don't want to carry this feeling alone? If it's the latter, write it down. Sit with it. Let it settle in silence first. Because the truth is, some people haven't earned the right to hold what's most fragile in you. And you owe it to yourself not to hand over something sacred just because someone is convenient or familiar. Protect your energy stoically. Not everyone needs to know what you're healing from. Not everyone can meet you where you are, and that's okay. Your strength is not in how loudly you share, but in how wisely you choose when to speak and who is truly ready to listen. When you stop needing to be understood by everyone, you free yourself to keep growing without interruption. That kind of freedom doesn't come from exposure. It comes from discernment. And once you learn that, you stop looking for the right ears and start listening more closely to your own 7 speak less, act more. There is a certain kind of exhaustion that doesn't come from hard work, it comes from listening to people talk endlessly about what they're going to do and never seeing them do it. You've heard it too many times. I'm finally going to eat clean. I'll apply for that job next week. This time, I'm serious. They say it with conviction, maybe even excitement. But days pass, then weeks, and everything stays exactly the same. And over time, those words lose weight. Not because the intention is bad, but because there's no movement behind it. Words without action are like smoke without fire. They look like something's happening, but there's no substance, no burn, no transformation. This is why your silence can become more powerful than someone else's promise. You don't need to announce your plans to the world to make them real. You don't need to narrate your shift or convince others that this time it's different. Just do it. Wake up early and start your morning routine. Build your discipline in private. Make changes not because you said you would, but because something inside you won't let you stay the same. In that space where action replaces explanation, your life starts to take shape. Think of someone you respect deeply, not because of what they say, but because of how they carry themselves. Maybe he never talked about changing, but he changed anyway. You noticed it in the way he walks with calm, listens fully, and shows up with quiet confidence. His discipline isn't loud, it radiates. There's no post, no speech, no declaration, just the energy of someone who's been doing the work without needing credit for it. That's the kind of presence people remember. That's the kind of presence that builds true respect. The Stoics were never impressed by people who spoke beautifully. They didn't chase admiration with poetic declarations. They lived simply, with inner alignment, acting deliberately and saying little. Epictetus made it clear, speech without action is noise. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in Rome, never wrote to be quoted. He wrote to keep himself accountable to his values. He never had to announce that he was working on himself. He simply did. Over time, the result wasn't a louder voice. It was a stronger soul when you constantly speak about what you're doing, what you're planning, what you're hoping. You burn energy in the wrong place. Instead of building something strong and unshakable, you get lost in the performance of progress, and performance fades. What lasts is quiet, consistent effort, the kind that no one needs to witness for it to matter. The kind that doesn't need applause to feel real. The kind that builds a quiet strength mindset. The kind you carry even when no one's watching. So the next time you feel the urge to explain what you're working on, don't. Let your actions speak for you. Let the results, the discipline, the subtle shift in how you respond, carry the message. If someone asks, smile. You don't owe an update, you owe yourself results. And those don't come from talking more, they come from doing more. Speak less, not because you're hiding, but because you've outgrown the need to prove. Act more, not for attention, but for alignment. Let your daily decisions build the foundation you walk on. You don't need to shout. You don't need to convince anyone. When the energy is real, it shows. And when it shows, it stays, long after the words are forgotten. That's what Stoic presence is made of. Clarity without noise, commitment without display, and growth that no one needs to see to know it's real. In a world addicted to noise, the choice to protect your peace silently is a radical act of strength. The more you speak about your struggles, your growth, your goals, the more you risk turning your evolution into a performance. But when you guard your energy stoically, when you stop oversharing your life and start living with quiet discipline, something changes. You stop reacting to every opinion, you stop needing constant applause, and you begin to feel the power of inner growth in silence. Stoic philosophy teaches that emotional discipline, self-control, and mental clarity come not from saying more, but from doing more. Speak less. Live more. Let your actions carry weight. Because when you stop narrating everything, you finally reclaim your identity, not as someone trying, but as someone becoming. And the world will feel it, without a word. If this message resonated with you, share your story in the comments. What have you stopped telling others to protect your peace? What part of your life are you building quietly? Let us know below. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more Stoic tools to help you train your thoughts daily and rewire your mindset for real transformation.